All right, let's dive into a game that really messed with my head, Cry of Fear. We're going deep, beyond just what happens, using the Wikipedia article, which is surprisingly detailed. Our goal is to understand why this game, which started as just a Half-Life mod, has become such a cult classic in psychological horror.
What's fascinating about Cry of Fear is that its development. It mirrors the themes of the game itself, perseverance, facing challenges, ultimately creating something impactful and unique.
I love that parallel. Okay, so for those not familiar, a mod is a fan-made change to an existing game. These developers in Sweden, Team Six Scalar, they took Half-Life and built this whole new terrifying world on top.
And they didn't rush it. This wasn't some quick project. They spent 4 years, from 2008 to 2012, honing their vision. Imagine the dedication, the late nights, the testing, the refining.
I read that even the flashlight, a simple tool in most games, it went through multiple iterations. They wanted it to feel just right, to add to that vulnerability.
It's that attention to detail that elevates Cry of Fear. They even switched game engines mid-development, going from the standard Half-Life renderer to one from another mod called Paranoia. This let them push the graphics further and create a more immersive atmosphere.
So they were already working on this mod for years, and then they decided to change the entire engine. That must have been huge.
It really shows their commitment.
Yeah.
And their willingness to embrace new challenges, much like Simon, the protagonist, does.
Okay, before we get to Simon, can we talk about the gameplay for a bit? What makes Cry of Fear's mechanics stand out, especially for a game that started as a mod?
It's the blend of survival horror and first-person shooter. It's not just running and hiding. You have to fight back against these creatures, but you're always outmatched, always on edge.
And the inventory system, oh man, the inventory system, 6 slots, that's it. And you can't pause. I can feel my heart rate going up just thinking about it.
That's what's so brilliant about it, that constant pressure, the fear of fumbling while a monster is charging you. It's brilliant game design, forcing players to make tough choices and stay immersed.
And you can dual wield items, right? So you could have a weapon in one hand and a light in the other.
Exactly. Do you choose offense or defense? Visibility or firepower? Every decision has consequences, adding to the tension and the strategy.
It's not just a mindless shooter. It's about survival, about resource management,
Yeah.
about constantly weighing your options.
And then there's the morphine. You need it to heal, but overuse blurs your vision. It's a risk-reward system that reflects Simon, the desperate measures he takes to survive.
So Simon, 19 years old, wakes up in a dark alley after an accident. Not how I'd like to start my day.
It's a brutal introduction to the nightmare. We're thrown into this dark world alongside him, disoriented, confused, vulnerable.
And this isn't just some city, it's Stockholm, where the developers are from. I read they used real locations to make it even more unsettling.
It adds that layer of realism to the horror. These places exist, making the nightmare feel tangible.
Okay, so Simon is stumbling through the city, battling these grotesque creatures, trying to piece together what's happening. And we, the players, are right there with him.
And it's a descent that's masterfully paced. The game starts with this creeping dread, a slow burn that builds.
Like finding a dead man in a bathtub.
Or that encounter with the chainsaw-wielding monster.
Which then decapitates itself. An image that stays with you.
It's filled with these shocking moments, designed to unsettle the player and push the boundaries of horror. But it's not just cheap scares. There's depth, a connection to Simon's mental state.
And then there's the doctor, this mysterious figure who keeps appearing, giving these cryptic warnings.
The Doctor is a fascinating character, a symbol of both help and manipulation. He represents the ambiguity of Simon's situation, the uncertainty.
And what about Sophie, Simon's childhood friend? Their relationship is tragic.
Sophie adds emotional depth to the game. She represents hope, a connection to a past life, as Simon descends into madness.
But their encounter on the rooftop, it ends in tragedy, with Sophie taking her own life. It's a gut-wrenching scene, underscoring the themes of loss, despair, and mental health.
It's a pivotal moment, a turning point that pushes him further down.
Okay, so we've got a troubled protagonist, a city filled with creatures, a mysterious doctor, a tragic love story. Where does this all lead?
That's where things get interesting. Cry of Fear isn't just about surviving. It's about understanding Simon's descent, about the choices he makes and the consequences.
And those choices impact the multiple endings, each one offering a different perspective on his fate.
But before those endings, let's look at another aspect of Cry of Fear, the co-op campaign.
Oh yeah, I almost forgot about that. I haven't had the chance to play it, but I've heard it's a whole new perspective on the story.
It is. While Simon is in his nightmare, there's a parallel story unfolding. focusing on two police officers.
So we see the chaos through their eyes.
Exactly. It's interwoven with Simon's journey, offering glimpses into the larger events.
That's brilliant. It's like we get a peek behind the curtain, experiencing the nightmare from multiple perspectives.
And speaking of mystery, we can't forget the connection to Afraid of Monsters. There are hints and Easter eggs throughout Cry of Fear that suggest a connection.
Okay, now you've got me hooked. I need to know more about this connection, about those endings, and what it means for Simon.
Well, that's what deep dives are for. Stay with us and we'll unravel those mysteries together.
Okay, we left off talking about multiple endings and a tie-in to another game. I'm officially intrigued. Let's get back into Cry of Fear. So we know the game is deeply psychological. It's all in Simon's head, right?
Yes, the city, the monsters, the characters, all manifestations of his trauma, anxieties, inner turmoil. But the brilliance is how the game doesn't just tell you that. It lets you experience the horror, to feel the confusion and fear alongside Simon, and then you piece together the meaning.
That makes it even more disturbing, because it becomes a reflection of our own fears. What's monstrous to me might be different for you.
Precisely. Take the environments, for example. The rundown apartment building, flickering lights and bloodstains. The subway tunnels with echoing footsteps and shadows. The creepy college with deserted hallways and silence.
Oh, and that forest. Don't even get me started on the forest. It was such a shift in atmosphere, going from the city to this desolate, primal landscape.
Each environment reflects a facet of Simon's mental state. The apartment building, a place of safety. It becomes oppressive as he goes deeper, symbolizing his descent. The subway, connection and movement, becomes a labyrinth of fear. The college, learning and growth, is now empty and lifeless, reflecting lost potential. And the forest, that's where his primal fears take over, stripping away civilization, exposing him to the darkness within.
Wow, you've blown my mind. I never thought about the environments like that. It's like the game is a visual of Simon's psyche, each location symbolizing something.
And then there are the monsters, each one a grotesque embodiment of Simon's trauma. The deformed creatures, they could represent his pain from the accident. The figures in the shadows, they could be his fear, anxiety, guilt.
Even that creepy doctor, the one who's supposed to be helping, he ends up betraying Simon. It's like his distrust in authority, or maybe even his therapist.
Remember, the game says that doctor is based on his real therapist. This adds another layer, blurring reality and fantasy.
That scene where the doctor turns on him, it's like the ultimate betrayal. It reinforces that Simon can't trust anyone.
And then there's Sophie, the one person Simon connects with, a reminder of before the trauma.
But even that ends in tragedy. Her suicide, a devastating blow, a symbol of last hope. It's like a part of Simon dies with her.
Her death is pivotal, a turning point. It's what pushes him over the edge.
Okay, so we've got this web of symbolism, this psychological tapestry. But how does it all tie together? You mentioned multiple endings, each one offering a different perspective. Let's unpack those.
Absolutely. And remember, the endings depend on your choices, whether you fight or flee from Carcass, and whether you gave the doctor the gun.
So our actions have an impact, just like in real life.
It is, and it shows the game's depth. It doesn't offer easy answers. It makes you confront the darkness and grapple with the consequences.
All right, I'm ready. Let's start with the darkest ending. What happens if we make all the wrong choices?
In the most tragic outcome, Simon, consumed by his demons, he takes his own life, but he also takes the lives of his therapist and Sophie.
Wow, that's bleak. He's lost touch with reality.
It highlights the consequences of untreated trauma, the way it warps our perception, and leads to violence.
So is there any hope for Simon? Any ending where he finds peace?
There are endings where he seeks help, where he recognizes he needs to confront his demons.
Like the ending where he fights his darker self.
Exactly. In that ending, depending on your choice, he can end up in a mental hospital, realizing he's had a breakdown, but with hope for recovery. Sophie even visits him, hinting at forgiveness and healing.
That's powerful. Even after everything, there's a chance for redemption.
It's a testament to the human spirit, the capacity for hope.
And it reminds us, mental health is complex. It requires compassion and understanding.
But there's another ending, a secret one. It connects Cry of Fear to Afraid of Monsters.
Okay, you got to tell me. How does it work? How do these two worlds collide?
Well, if you got the good ending, you can replay and find a package for Simon.
Like a reward for those who found the light.
In a way, yes. Inside, Simon finds pills. And if he takes them,
He goes down the rabbit hole.
he's transported to a location from Afraid of Monsters, and guess who shows up? David Letterhoff.
No way! But how? Why?
And here's the kicker. David hits Simon with a car, mirroring the event that started it all.
Whoa, it's like a cycle of trauma.
And there's another detail. Remember how they switched engines for better graphics? In this ending, David still uses his old model.
It's like a reminder of the developer's journey.
Exactly, connecting past and present. And David only speaks through text boxes.
It adds to the disconnect.
It leaves us with questions. What's the connection between them? Are they trapped? Is Afraid of Monsters a prequel?
This deep dive has gone so far. We're talking symbolism, psychology, reality.
And it all comes back to one question. What does it mean to face your fears? What happens when the monsters in your mind become real?
Those are questions that stay with you. And that's the power of Cry of Fear. It haunts you, challenges you, makes you question.
And demands to be discussed, analyzed.
And that's what we've done today, to unpack the layers and explore the depths
Of this unsettling masterpiece.
So we've really gone deep on this one. The symbolism, the mechanics, even Afraid of Monsters. I gotta admit, when I first played Cry of Fear, it just felt like, oh, a really creepy game. But now, hearing you break it all down, there's so much more there.
That's what we're here for, right? To see those things you might miss.
For sure. But, for someone who hasn't played Cry of Fear yet, what's the one thing they should know going in?
I'd say this. It's not just about being scared. It's designed to get under your skin. And it does that by blurring what's real and what's in Simon's head.
Yeah, that uncertainty. That's what got me. But did the game get good reviews? Was it just me, or did other people feel it too?
Oh, it got really positive reviews, both as a mod and as a standalone game. People loved the atmosphere, the story, the psychology.
How about scores, like on Metacritic?
It has an 8.2 user score, which is pretty good. And on ModDB, it's a 9.4, even higher. Clearly, it resonated with people.
But there must have been some criticisms.
Of course, no game is perfect. Some found the platforming a bit clunky, some complained about the graphics, even after the engine switch. And some felt the later weapons made it less scary.
Oh, interesting. So, the stronger Simon gets, the less we fear for him. Like, he's becoming the monster.
That's a good point. Maybe the developers wanted to show that shift in his mental state,
Yeah.
as he loses touch and embraces violence.
Okay, so to wrap things up, Cry of Fear, a game that began as a mod, became this exploration of trauma and mental breakdown. We talked about the devs, the gameplay, the symbolism, the secret ending.
It shows what indie devs can do, how a small team can make something unforgettable.
But here's what sticks with me. If you take away the horror, the monsters, the scares, you're left with this story about a young man and his demons. And that's what makes it powerful. It makes us look at the darkness inside us all.
And it reminds us that even in darkness, there's hope. A chance to heal, to find our way back.
So, listeners, whether you love horror or just a good psychological thriller, check out Cry of Fear. Just be ready for a ride that stays with you.
And as you play, think about this. If the monsters are his trauma, what do the different endings say about him? About his journey, his recovery?
That's something to think about. Until next time, deep divers, keep exploring